we're just gonna leave that out. It's mostly about your experience and your point of view, mostly. That's what's most interesting. We just did a webinar with I don't know if you know them. It's called J2 Approvisionnement.
No, I don't think so.
It's like a supply chain kind of a supply chain kind of a firm which help
Cool.
other people do improve their supply chain. And the cool stuff is that we have like their perspective, and then we can have like perspective from like intern and people literally working in the supply chain.
Oh,
And
so
it's
cool.
really useful for everybody in the that is working in that industry. It helped get a lot of I'd say it, a better perspective about how it's actually like, and what's the problems, and what are the challenges of others. Cool, perfect. So that being said, I want to welcome you to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
One thing that would be really nice is you telling us a bit about your background and how you ended up as a procurement professional.
For
I've
sure.
looked a bit at your education. It's a bit atypical.
Yeah.
So tell us more about yourself.
I'm definitely a little bit of a odd journey. I have a bachelor's of music performance from Western.
Okay,
I'm
wow.
a classically trained vocalist. I worked for a number of years as a singer and an actress, and it was super fun. But as a career, just not in alignment with what I wanted out of life. So I came fresh grad and realizing, okay, I know what I don't want to do, but what do I want to do? And I first started out in like a lot of people, retail. Found a lot of success there, had a lot of fun, and that kind of opened the door to more business pursuits. And then for a little while, I worked in the banking sector, and I thought I'd go the finance route. But my mom is actually, she's worn a lot of hats, but at that time, she was working in a supply chain team.
Okay,
And she
nice.
said to me, have you thought about this? I think your personality is a really great fit. A lot of the things you've liked in your other roles, it makes sense. So I said, sure. At that point, too, when I was still living in Ontario, and there was an incentive for mature students like myself. So I could go back to school for very, very minimal funding. And I got to go to Fanshawe College, which was local to me as well. They have a really great supply chain program. And I was lucky enough to be part of it and really threw myself at it.
Yeah,
I was
and you,
in everything.
I see your GPA, and you absolutely crushed that program. This is awesome.
Thank you. Maybe a little too hard on the books for a while. We had to find a balance of maybe I don't get perfect on everything. But that was kind of the thought. You know, it's not a super long program. It's 2 years of class and then a co-op portion as well, which was part of why I wanted to go through. So I had a lot of fun learning, but I really wanted to take advantage of that time. And the course content's excellent, but honestly, I would say more than anything, the networking opportunities I got. I was the president of our Apex chapter. And through that, I met so many amazing professionals. I learned so much, and it actually led to my placement directly with my co-op. And so at that point, I started working for a ball bearings company based out of Germany originally, but they had a location in Ontario as well. And when I was working for that company in my internship, like I think a lot of people, I was also kind of birthed into the fire. We'll go with that.
Yeah.
That my career started as COVID started.
Oh boy.
And a large chunk of who we were servicing was automotive and aerospace. And
Oh
at that
boy.
point, there was also the chip shortages, so everything was crazy. And I came in. I was there for a
And
couple
you
of
were in
months.
logistic?
Yeah. And then the person who I trained
Oh
under
boy.
moved into a different role, and the person who was going to replace her left the company. So all of a sudden, it was Brittany all by herself. But it was great. You got to learn, getting a chance to rise to the challenge. And I had a really amazing team there. I'm still good friends with lots of the people I'd met through that team, and a really great experience. But because of how circumstances turned out, they'd asked if I'd like to stay on. And typically with my program, how it would work, you'd do a placement and then come back for your final level of study.
Right.
I had to get kind of creative to find a fix. And I took some courses with the graduate program and some courses with my program to make it work. I got special permission to finish up part-time online while continuing on with the company. And super busy. I was super tired. There was definitely
Shoot.
days where I was doing an expedite on one computer and trying to study for an exam on the other computer. But you learn a lot, and it was great to have the actual lived experience that I could reference while I was
Yeah,
studying
yeah,
too.
yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And then from there, we were
Cool.
talking about it a little before. My program was more heavily, it was logistics and supply chain management, but the program really focused heavily on the procurement side. And that had
Okay.
always been where I saw myself going long term. I'd seen a few opportunities. I was looking for a place. And unfortunately, with the team I was doing my internship with, most of their operations for procurement just weren't located in Canada. So I wouldn't have had
Okay.
the
Yeah.
opportunity to work with them. Um, I stumbled across the opportunity I had most recently before my current role. Didn't see that it was Montreal and found out after applying. Originally, I thought, oh, well, I don't have the other language. It's not going to work out. And it did. So again,
You're
continuing the theme.
you
Learn
run
as
it.
we go.
You ran
Yeah.
the whole thing in the hard mode, like
Yeah.
directly into COVID logistic. You go into a company in procurement with half of the language in your under your belt. This is awesome, man. Wow.
It's been a journey. But again, you get to learn so much. You meet amazing people from all over. And I really enjoyed that role. That team was fantastic. And it was a really tight team of buyers, very small. So you got to wear a lot of hats. You got to be exposed to a lot of sides of the business. And because it was a smaller operation, I got to really know my accounting team and lots of different spheres within the business too, just by the nature of it. If somebody needed something, they were going to come find you.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and that kind of understanding really translated well into my current role. So now I'm a purchase to pay analyst. So really anything that falls in that stream, I help be a part of, and then a little bit troubleshooting within SAP as well. So it's been really cool to learn. Definitely an interesting journey so far, and I'm excited to see where things keep going.
Well, this is absolutely amazing, and yes, the team at Wayback are super great. We
Mm-hmm.
know them very well. One thing I want to dig a bit more into is what initially was the driver for procurement, because that's kind of what was your goal.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly was the thing that made you said yes, I'm gonna go
Sure.
and do all of these stuff?
For myself, to a certain extent, I'm a little bit of a bleeding heart. So I've always loved the ethical side of procurement, and the ways in which money is power, and different initiatives can support different communities and the impact that those kind of decisions and looking at things from that bigger picture perspective can have. Um, that always really appealed to me and was something I was super interested in pursuing. And in addition to some of the more analytical spheres that I could move into, um, especially in my current role, that's really what I've enjoyed. Looking at different options, weighing out different potentials, and I love the multidisciplinary nature of it, and getting to work with people all over the company, all kinds of different interests, and you learn constantly. If you're somebody who likes to learn, it's a really great area to be in.
Yeah, yeah, and honestly, this is kind of the same thing that initially drove me. I also have like a pretty atypical uh,
I've
background.
creeped your
Pretty,
LinkedIn too. I saw.
yeah. You saw the consciousness
Uh-huh.
stuff, but
Well, but
like
it makes sense in its
it
funny
does.
way. It's the same. Honestly, I would say the same thing
Yeah,
with music. It's
yeah.
it's all a language. It's all a means of thinking. It's all being able to adapt and pick up things quickly, and presentation and working with different people and.
That's it. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And like
Mhm.
the empathy that you need also to have when you're in this kind of situation. In my side, like one thing that really drove me to continue the project that
Mhm.
I've been doing in procurement is really like it's both the impact that you can have on multiple people, because procurement really sits in between like everything. Like you have the finance folks, you have the production, you have the supply, like you have salespeople, you have everybody kind of like interacting with it, which is
Totally.
also what it make it very difficult. But the second thing that really drove me is the data,
Yeah.
and the amount of insight that you can gain from it, and the lack, I would say, of leverage usually
Hmm.
in companies to really do the work and understanding what this data means and how can it be used. So I think we see some similarity here. One thing I wanted to ask you is, right now in your job and the previous one,
Hmm.
procurement, what do you enjoy the most of all of this stuff?
We've really got a theme going. This works well. That very much the same kind of thing. I like getting to get a little glimpse into all kinds of different people's worlds and learning a little bit for good or for bad. You know, there's certainly days where
Yeah.
I'm not everybody's favorite person, but there's certainly days where not everybody's my favorite either. Um, Getting to see, learning, hearing about how things impact. There's stuff I never would have known about.
Mm,
That, one time someone needed something very specific that seemed inconsequential at the time, but you get to learn so much and you never know when it comes up again.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
and now a little bit dipping my feet into the data sphere, I think it's really interesting how much you can learn from this end of the business and how much it can be such a driver for all kinds of different things, like that big ripple out effect you can see from decisions at our end. It's
Yeah.
really fascinating.
That's where the good stuff is. Like it's
Hmm.
the data that has been sitting there and then no one really looked at it.
Yeah.
Um, this is where like when you mine it properly and then you get the stuff going, you really see stuff that you're like, okay, wow. So if I can just visualize this and show it to people, we're gonna be able to do X and Y. Um, yeah, that's one of the best that is driving me in my job, and I see that it's the same. Um, from your point of view,
Hmm.
um, what does it take to be like a good procurement professional, especially like post COVID after all of the
Hmm.
changes that happened?
Say like three real key traits, and then everything else you can learn. Um, you've got to be someone who is an effective communicator. The reality is, we're working with a lot of different teams, a lot of different people, and specificity is your friend. And the patience to do that. Within that kind of direction, being an effective collaborator too. It's a branch of being a strong communicator, but you may be effective at articulating what you want, not always translates into being able to flush out exactly what your colleagues are looking for. And then the most important above everything else is being willing to learn. It's not even that you have to be, the smartest, most academic person in the world. I really think it's something, if you're someone who's willing to continuously learn, especially, you'll do excellent. Inflexibility is not your friend, and the modern landscape, especially, it's changing constantly. I haven't been in industry that long, and I've seen it change a ton just since I've started, let
Yeah, yeah,
alone,
yeah.
5, 10 years from now.
Yeah. But definitely like um, for the procurement professional that I know that are top notch and they are able to drive good change in their business. Like usually they have, well, when they have some atypical background,
Hmm.
and by default, because they have an atypical background and they had to learn by themselves most of the stuff, they have this innate ability to actually want to learn. And if there's a
Absolutely.
new stuff coming up, let's say some engineer says something about the thing that you're buying and then you don't know about it, and you actually dig a bit more into it, you learn something that is useful after that for
Hmm.
your negotiation, for understanding the data and how you should source your stuff. But
Definitely.
that is definitely one of the core driver. The one that I see that have a bit of a harder time,
Hmm.
especially post COVID, because like there's way more fluctuation in the
Hmm.
supply chain throughout all sector, is the people that are a bit more rigid, um,
Absolutely.
and that didn't really adapt. That's a bit more rough because you have to be flexible. You have to understand also the, like you said, be able to kind of collaborate and understand the other people point of view. Let's say the suppliers, if they say to you like, hey, sorry, raw material, it's all crazy, I can't do this and that. If you're too rigid, you're not going to
It's
get to
gonna
your
be
point.
hard. It's not gonna be a whole lot of fun.
Yeah.
Mm.
One thing that I've seen you doing, and I think honestly, I think that's the future. I'm not gonna go on a rant about it, but I see that you're training yourself in data science. Um, but for me, that's definitely the future of the profession. But can you tell me a bit more about like what motivated you to learn data science and apply it to your procurement professional career?
Definitely. I'd echo a lot of similar sentiment. I see that is the way things are going. And I think, like a lot of people, it's driven by a couple of different things. The program I've been pursuing is Google's data analytics certificate. And it's something I'd heard about from some colleagues and some friends and had been curious about on my own before. And it was a little bit of a mixture of curiosity and intrigue and liking that data area and looking for those opportunities, but also recognizing the changing landscape we're working in. I think it might have been Google's AI that I watched the video of negotiating a refund on an airline ticket and went, oh,
Oh, okay.
everything's
I
different.
saw that.
Everything's different. Everything's changed. Oh, and that's the reality. And it's not so much, ooh, be scared. It's more recognizing we have to be equipped to work with the tools that are going to be a part of our everyday. Uh, and preparing and learning and being someone who can adapt to that's great. I've always liked systems. It's always been an area of what I've done. I've really enjoyed. Um, I was lucky enough with my program to get to take some SAP courses and Excel and more of those like base level things. But I really enjoyed those courses. So it was something I was interested in already. My partner actually, he kind of went the opposite way of me. And he has a computer science degree and then went and did
Oh.
his doctorate in music. I know.
At some point in time, you're gonna converge,
We're gonna
right?
switch. Yeah. So a little bit that knowledge and watching how
Yeah,
that's helped him in his career as well. I think there's nobody who doesn't benefit from it.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and that program's it's pretty introductory, but from it, I'd say really any sphere, I don't see someone who wouldn't benefit from learning.
Yeah,
Um, the programming languages are good to have some base level knowledge of, but even things like honestly, the most valuable for data, I think, was the data visualization unit.
yeah.
Everybody could benefit from that. I don't think there's a single person who can't.
I recently I was doing a customer visit, and then one of the person told me like, okay, but what about the AI, right? What
Hmm.
can you tell us about the AI for your stuff? And I was like, okay, guys, first stop. The first thing you need to get together is collect the data and visualize it. If you can do that, right, you're almost the AI. You're able to
Hmm.
look at the stuff, notice pattern, right, and then be able to take decision. Just this is like more than what 95% of the companies out there can do. Like just being able to visualize your data and knowing that you can visualize the data is something powerful, and that you can kind of finesse your way toward doing that. And I think that's one of um, the core skill is not to be like a full blown data
Hmm.
scientist and then do all this stuff, but it's knowing that you can do the movement to get something together if you need to. And this knowledge and this kind of mindset that you can apply, it changes a lot of the stuff, because then you
Hmm.
don't have to ask IT to do this, and then you don't really know. But
Absolutely.
if you know that you have the data, right, and you know roughly how you want to visualize it, like the in between, yes, like it's not that complicated to get together, but you have to know that there's a path, and
Hmm.
once you have the visualization, it's crazy the benefit just of a good visualization, like just a
Absolutely.
choosing the right visualization for the right information and for the right kind of analysis you want to do. You do that, slap this together on a PowerPoint, you're like, here is the information, and people start talking.
Light
um
bulb goes off and
exactly, people,
yeah.
but it's sometimes it's stuff that they have kind of rough feeling, right? Because they've seen enough the data stream going, but they never like put it together in their mind and then like generate an insight out of it. But then you just being able to take that information that is being collected, slap it into a PowerPoint, and then focusing the discussion, it lead after that to like big change that you can do that can have massive impact.
Absolutely.
And no stats here, no, not even any AI, but this is like a massive starting point. So I wanted to ask you, from your point of view, what major shift in the industry, especially in manufacturing and procurement, have you seen with respect to data management?
There's a lot of different things that we could draw on. I think there's overall a higher level of interest than there's been in the past. I'd say the same thing with supply chain as a whole. All of a sudden, we've become this very sexy thing when before it was quite niche.
Yeah.
When I came in for my program, and noted, take it with a grain of salt, because I was an odd entrant. There was like the first year they were offering like a February intake, but when I came in, your first year is general, or your first level is general, and I was the only one from supply chain, all by myself.
Oh boy. Okay, cool.
But I would say
you had great conviction that this will lead somewhere.
it's a lot more intrigue in general, and then with that added emphasis on it, with people starting to pay attention, the numbers come alongside. Having good data, having things that are driven, I think you can't get away with it being by gut or because I know this person or I know this supplier and I've worked with them and da 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 da. Relationship management's absolutely super important, but you've got to have something to back it up too.
Yeah. That's definitely the same sentiment that I've got from like both sides. Like I've talked to a smaller supplier that we're working with, bigger player, and one phrase that someone told me that was like the thing that you see going in the data, and then you see the feeling of someone that feel this lack of connection in data and data management. He said that some of the company, they're amnesic after some point. They kind of forget about them, even if they are a great supplier for like 10 years.
Absolutely.
And what happened is that the person that was duct taping the connection with them and creating value for their company and the buyer company is gone. And then the new person, they don't know them, right? And they won't dive into the data to kind of get up to speed and know them. So they just get cut off and then they lose.
Absolutely.
It's a
all
lose
that good history, all of
exactly.
what we've done.
It's a lose situation on this side because the supplier was super legit for a specific type of processes, and the buyer benefited from that for like 10 years. But then the one guy is gone, and then you lose a chunk of your history and data. So definitely, I think that tying this up all together, I have a strong feeling that the procurement professional of the future will look like a bit like you. I think in a sense that they will be like driven by the supply chain, but understand that the data part and understanding the data is a core part of the profession. It's not like an aside or like an add-on that you tack onto your stuff. It's like that's what it's all about. It's like looking at the information, being able to move with it, and then generate insight.
Absolutely.
So you've went into a few company, and one thing I want to know a bit about is what makes an employer like ideal for you from like everything you've seen and maybe from the expertise of your mom.
Definitely. I'm a little bit of a broken record on it, but while I'm someone who's very willing to invest in learning, I want my employer to be the same. It's not necessarily, someone who's going to hold your hand. There's certainly room for learning as you go, and that's definitely been a theme throughout my career. But looking for an employer that supports those kind of learning initiatives, whether that's through training incentives, through, tuition reimbursement, whatever it is. Someone who believes in that kind of journey, and a culture that values good information, data, systems, knowledge. It seems intuitive, but there's quite a few places that really that space isn't there, or they're just not at that level yet. And I think it's also really important to have flexibility in your employer as well as a procurement professional. It's great if you are someone who's willing to test and explore and experiment, but if that's not supported, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Mhm.
as if you're doing it on top of other stuff, and then it's not being
Exactly.
recognized, even though like it's very useful.
And not
Um,
being afraid to dive into initiatives that can open up the space for the future of procurement too.
yeah,
Moving, like you were saying, to having the space to focus on data and analysis and digging into why things happen, what makes sense, rather than, the tactical day-to-day operations.
yeah, and I think what's gonna happen is that the curriculum will not catch up to the
Hmm.
need fast enough.
Hmm.
And I think it's up to literally the industry to upskill their focus, especially since like recruiting someone in supply chain right now
Oh
is
my
not
gosh.
easy. It's very, very hard. So you have like
Absolutely.
people that are in high demand, and that will have a high workload if like
Hmm.
not managed properly. So same thing. I think like it needs to be driven from the top, and then that this is made a priority. Like we're gonna hire people, and then we're gonna direct resource at them so that they can enhance themselves. There's a
Definitely.
like it's a it's crazy what you can do when you have a vast amount of historical data, and you know what to do with it. As soon as you have that
Hmm.
going, you're able technically to do the work of like multiple people that are doing stuff a bit more manually. But
Absolutely.
you have to have that mindset, and it's about augmenting these people more than
Hmm.
trying to hire an army of intern to do the job.
I guess within that too, there's a cultural emphasis on having good quality data as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's really hard. You can have lots of information, but if it's not being maintained and there's not an emphasis on making sure that what we need is currently in place,
yeah.
I can't make the data exist.
Yeah, and in supply chain in particular, it's very, very
Hmm.
difficult because like in other because I've studied that the setup in detail, and the main issue is that it's sitting right at the edge, usually per the
Hmm.
procurement function of your system and like the supplier system,
Hmm.
and the supplier system are not connected to your stuff. And no way, it's hard for the ERP to be able to synchronize all of that.
Definitely.
So being able to understand this first, just to realize that this is a fact, and that you have a lot of unstructured data, and that you have to have a good strategy in place in order to be able to get this information, get what, not everything, first, of course, but like get the information that is strategic, and
Hmm.
ensure that it's correctly categorized and compiled historically. Um, that's one of the most important. And I think in supply chain in general, this will be a competitive advantage. The company that do realize that, and the others that are not mature enough to realize that. Because if you're
Absolutely.
not fixing this and collecting this information between you and your supplier properly, um, it's very hard. It's very difficult because if everything comes unstructured, trying to make like
Hmm.
that structured afterward, after the fact, is
Woof.
harder. It's harder than if you can put something in place in order to collect information.
Hmm.
And it needs to be a conscious effort. You're not going to collect everything at first. Look at like where in your current data that you have in your system, where the leverage is, and then start to put in place practices so that you can actually get this information, and ask yourself afterward like, okay, do I have enough? Can we draw a conclusion? What's missing? And then you iterate like
Definitely.
this. Cool. I love this. And So from your point of view now, with
Mhm.
all of this information, what do you think is next for the procurement profession?
Ooh, it's gonna be fun. We'll put it that way. I think you hit the nail on the head. Honestly, I want to see more and more of this marriage between data and procurement, especially as tools evolve. Again, going back to the AI space, what's it good at? Repetitive tasks. So you're going to see those repetitive tasks in the process go away as more and more people invest in it, as it becomes more affordable. And automation in general is already starting to do that. We're already seeing it. As data starts to be more involved, I think you're going to get more awareness, more consciousness, and more companies are going to see the value in building in the data process into how they're approaching taking information in and how they're exchanging information. And you'll see a shift, just like you were talking about, more focus on building in checks and balances, having clean data before rather than reacting. And you're going to see a real split and divide between who decided to and who did not. And there'll be a definite point where it'll be visible on who's made those investments and who hasn't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I 100% agree here. And the AI thing, I think, is you very well put it. It's about automation of like repetitive tasks,
Mhm.
and some people
Don't
are
be scared. It's not going to replace us. It's just
exactly.
a
So
friend.
some people are a bit confused, especially
Mhm.
because like the generative AI craze that cranked up kind
Mhm.
of confused a bit everybody, and they were like, "Can do contract for me?" And then like they will respond to my
Panic.
supplies for me. Like it could, but
Mhm.
by definition and default, how these large language models are set up is that they are creative things. So they will have errors embedded in it, right? Like creativity is about
Mhm.
having errors in the correct ways of doing the thing. And the fact that there's not necessarily one way of doing something that is 100% always correct. There's like
Mhm.
a some ground for creativity or error. But the problem is, in most of the tasks, it's about doing the right stuff
Mhm.
repetitively. So if the thing that you're putting in place and just like cranking up to everything is being a bit too creative, let's say in your contract and all this stuff, you're gonna have a hard time. So it's not about replacing all the humans from the loop. It's augmenting them and
Mhm.
then having them check up the stuff.
Absolutely.
And having the technical maturity to understand that is super important, because if you don't have this technical maturity and you focus your attention purely on generative AI stuff and trying to automate my whole supply chain and all this stuff, you're missing on
Mhm.
the where 95% of the value is, which is just look at your data.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and that's exactly it. You can have all of the fancy systems you want, but if we're not starting from the right focus,
yeah,
good
it's
luck.
like I get it. Yeah. So that being said, what do you think most manufacturers should do to be better in their procurement operations?
I think start investing in some data literacy for your team. That can look like a lot of different things. And the great thing is, there's so many resources out there that are free or really low cost. There's a really great community of people who are genuinely passionate about this space and super open and willing to share their knowledge. So you can have a lot of flexibility in what that can look like for your team. I'd say start to get curious about it. As leaders, especially, start to explore what that could look like for your team. It doesn't have to be a complete overhaul. It's just starting to build the blocks in. Start to get curious and start from the beginning. Start asking questions. Start cleaning up your data. Start making sure that your inputs are there and ready and something that can build valuable information. It's not going to happen overnight. You can't flip a switch and suddenly have all the information you want. It's going to take time. So start by putting the good information in place and building the stores of information you've got. So when you're ready to really invest in, say, those technical tools or systems, you've got your information there, ready to go.
That was beautiful. That
Thank
was
you.
super well said. Like as someone with a strong data science background, I can see exactly when someone actually get it, or like if they superficially get it, and I can guarantee everybody, Brittany does get it. So it was fantastic. Thank you very
No,
much
thank you.
for this. It was inspiring. It was insightful. And people, if you want to kind of get the taste of the future of procurement and get some help, getting some guidance, I think pinging Brittany Wilson on LinkedIn will be a good use of your time. So that being said, thank you very much for being here. This was the Data Driven Supply Chain Podcast, and we'll see you all in another episode. Thanks.
No, thank
That was
you.
awesome.